Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. XXers are hedonists, and that's why XXers can't make things work without men. They can't run businesses without men. They can't be thrown on an island and survive without men. They can't do anything without men. Hedonism does not lead to anything good. It's actually incredibly destructive. And it's connected to laziness as well. And so, MGTOW is incredibly hedonistic, at least the MGTOW men who have sex with XXers are. And it's not a good thing. This is objectively, obviously not a good thing. It blows my mind that they could think that it's anything other than entirely bad. Considering the fact that XXers are hedonists, and considering the fact that XXers as a whole, very, very, that XXers as a whole, or at least a very, very large percent of them, considering they can't really do anything without the help of men, obviously not all of them, but as a whole, XXers can't do anything without men. A very, very large percentage of them can't do anything without men. And I'm not even talking about like sex or kids or provision or government or fighting. I'm talking about even just building businesses and running them and running society and having a functional society, all that. XXers can't do it. They just can't fucking do it. They can't do anything. Obviously, a few can. There's XXers who are weightlifters and are way stronger than the average guy. There's XXers who are high-level experts in martial arts and they're just incredibly skilled at it. Incredibly skilled fighters. Even in high-level martial arts, not just, basic bitch martial arts like karate or even worse, taekwondo. I'm talking like high-level martial arts, like Budo Taijutsu. They're experts in that who are women. So women are experts in all things. XXers who are incredible coders, etc. There's almost certainly survivalists who are XXers. So in every field, you can find XXers who are incredibly good at it. But they are a tiny percentage, and they are the exception, And most women, most XXers have no interest in doing that kind of stuff. And even if they could have an interest in it, even if they do want to do it, they just are not, they're not equipped. They're not capable. It's just not, their brain is not engineered to be good at that. So they just can't do it, even if they try. But the vast majority of XXers are not good at anything. Right? They can't code, they can't do survival stuff, they can't get along, they can't work hard, they don't have common sense, they don't keep their word, etc. So they can't really have functional friendships without men mediating and forcing them to, be decent people. They can't get along with men. They can't make a marriage work. They can't, work at a job without being tutored by men, etc., etc. So it really is the case that all men have to do in this war against XXers is walk the fuck away. And I'm not talking about walking away in terms of going MGTOW, because XXers will just be polygamous. MGTOW is not going to put any pressure on the desirable XXers, the 7 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 XXers. The 1 out of 10 to 3 out of 10 XXers don't matter. The 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, and 3 out of 10 XXers, they don't really matter. No one wants them anyway, especially the 1 out of 10s and probably most or all of the 2 out of 10s. Yeah, some of the 3 out of 10s can find men, but, probably only because of extreme gynocentrism. So yeah, these XXers don't matter, right? And MGTOW won't put much pressure on the 4 out of 10 to 6 out of 10 XXers. It'll pressure them a little, but not much. They'll just become polygamous. They'll polygynous, it might get them to be a little more moral, but, MGTOW's not going to get them to cave, not without using physical force. MGTOW sure as hell won't get XXers out of the workforce, especially with men like Coltane out there promoting falsehoods like XXers getting the workforce and not telling the truth. Coltane just either doesn't understand or he's not honest. He's either, not smart enough to understand that XXers being in the workforce drives down male wages, or he's not, honest about it. He's either lying about it or he's not smart enough to realize it. The truth is that the greater the percentage of the population that is in the workforce, the more wages decrease. It's economics 101. It's basic supply and demand. Only an idiot who doesn't understand basic supply and demand thinks that XXers increasing the percentage of people in the workforce doesn't drive down male wages. It's undeniable. I mean, it's so obvious. It's so basic. It's just economics 101 that I don't understand how anyone could think anything else. Now, obviously, other things drive down male wages as well. Yes, outsourcing drives down male wages. Yes, immigration drives down male wages. There are other things driving down male wages. But, XXers being in the workforce is another one of those major things that is also driving down male wages. So considering the fact that, probably over 90% of XXers are hedonists and can't do anything without men, this means that all men have to do is walk away by forming a no-go zone, preferably a huge no-go zone, with millions of men in it, and then invite all men in and forbid any XXers from coming in. The no-go zone would then quickly get very functional and very prosperous. And once it does, even more men will want to come in, and then it'll get even bigger, and then they'll buy or forcibly annex land from around the no-go zone, thus growing the no-go zone. The no-go zone will grow like a cancer and will take over the whole country, and then XXers will be begging to be let into the no-go zone, even if that means giving up all their rights, all their freedoms, so that they're like children. They're treated well, but they have no rights, no power, no authority, no freedom. No right to own property or anything else significant, no right to have premarital sex, no right to vote, no right to deny their man sex, no right to disrespect any man. All men have to do is form a no-go zone, and XXers are going to want to join, especially as it gets very big and very functional and very huge and prosperous. XXers will be screaming to be allowed to join. And the more XXers who are left outside in the society outside the no-go zone, the more dysfunctional the outside society will become, because of the greater percentage of women that it'll have. The more the outside society will collapse because of all the non-freedom loving men left outside the no-go zone. Because XXers can't do things on their own without men. Just let Facebook and Google and the government and Lockheed Martin and all the other corporations, just let them try to hire only XXers so that, 2/3, 3/4, 80% of their workforce is XXers. Just let them try and do that and see how quickly their companies collapse. Their companies will have an insane amount of lawsuits, all the backfighting, all the inefficiency and laziness. It would destroy their companies. Their companies would utterly crumble very quickly if they hired mainly only XXers. For real, I promise you. There would be so much inefficiency, lawsuits, backbiting, etc. It would annihilate those companies if they had mainly just XXer employees. So all the no-go zone has to do is just leave all the XXers and just let all the XXers fuck up the rest of society outside the no-go zone. Then the no-go zone gets super functional and prosperous because it's only men in the no-go zone, only men who are hetero. No non-hetero men in the no-go zone, because those guys are basically just like women, and they're extremely liberal. And they would thus be a cancer in the no-go zone. You got to keep them out. Preferably only conservative men who believe in sound money and little or no government, and believe in everyone being allowed to have extreme freedom, such as the level of freedom that we had when America was founded back in the late 1700s. Only let those kind of men into the no-go zone. Conservative, freedom-loving, men. If the no-go zone got to be 10% of the geographical size of America, but let's say had 50% of the men in the whole country, that is, it had way more population density, only 10% of the size of America, but was 50% of the men in the country, then that would be huge. That would be enough to suck a huge percentage of XXers into the no-go zone, at least if we let them in, right? Because the huge shortage of men outside of the no-go zone, that would just incentivize tons of women to want to give up everything to get into the no-go zone, give up all their rights, especially the shortage of marriageable men outside the no-go zone. The 90% of the country outside the no-go zone would collapse because of all the creative, hardworking, freedom-loving men living in the no-go zone, and all the stupid men, the lazy men, the weak men, the cowardly men, the liberal men living outside the no-go zone, and all the XXers living and working outside the no-go zone. Then once the 90% of the country collapsed, the 90%, outside the country, the 90% of land, and the, what would that be, like 75% of the population outside the no-go zone, whatever, all the land, all of America outside the no-go zone, once it collapsed, it would be easy for the no-go zone to then take over the rest of the land and then form a new country, occupying the same land as America and without having to forcibly overthrow the government. But men have to have the balls to walk away and form a no-go zone and use physical force to keep the cops out so that the U.S. cannot keep stealing from the people in the no-go zone. And then once they're no longer being robbed by taxation, tickets, fees, licenses, etc., things will get a lot more functional in the no-go zone. And the no-go zone will be able to compete with the outside world in terms of costs of products made within the no-go zone. Even the higher wages paid to men within the no-go zone would be offset by the lack of taxation and by the affordable housing due to there being no regulations requiring that housing to be of specific quality or size or any other restrictions, such as how many people can live in an apartment. And thus companies formed in the no-go zone would be profitable even though they would pay higher wages to men. And even if the wages are not as high as they should be, the men would still have a much higher standard of living, or at least a survivable standard of living, because of the much lower cost of rent because of the lack of regulations. I'm talking about even guys who are super stupid and thus super poor. Even these guys will be able to rent. You know, they'll be able to have their own apartment instead of living at their parents' house like these days. A huge percentage of guys are doing, you know, because they're so poor. Like, you know, like the guys in such a country would be able to rent a place for $100 or $200 a month. Sure, it would be a tiny little place, a crappy little place, probably without a kitchen or anything. You know, maybe there would be a communal bathroom used by everybody with a bunch of those tiny little places all together, but whatever. At least he gets to, you know, live by his own. At least he, you know, can survive. At least he, you know, is not super stressed out about money because, you know, even though he's making crap money in his job, at least he can survive on his own. You know, guys are good at contentment, you know what I mean? So all the guy has to be able to do is, you know, have a job where he's getting treated with respect. He's okay at the job, and he's getting paid enough to afford an apartment and all the other basic necessities of life. That's all he needs. You know what I'm saying? And that is not the case for a lot of men these days in America, young guys and stuff. You know, the 18 to 34 demographic or whatever that is, you know, the demographic that has the most incels. Like a ton of those guys are living at their parents' house because of the massive poverty. So that would not be a problem under a no-go zone or under anarcho-capitalism. You know, no-go zone is, you could say, in a sense, just like anarcho-capitalism. So yeah, you know, the place that he rents for $100 or $200 a month might be a tiny little place, just one tiny little room, like a little concrete box or something. But, you know, you can't even find such places in America today. You can find places like that in Mexico, but you can't find it in America. You know, and such places won't have any amenities, maybe even no electricity. But so what? There would be places where you could go and use electricity and you know, they give you internet access, or you have your own little portable Wi-Fi hotspot that you carry, a little portable Wi-Fi that you carry with you or whatever, and then, you know, you just go to the place with the electricity, and then you plug your devices in, and then they just charge you for the electricity, you know, and they don't gouge you or anything. They're making a decent profit, but they're still charging you hardly anything because electricity is super cheap. So then you don't even need to have electricity in the little place that you rent. You know, it could have no kitchen, no electricity, no internet access, nothing. As long as you have a computer and a portable little, you know, internet thing for yourself, then you just need to find somewhere that lets you rent electricity. And then you can use the internet at those places. You know, and then you just, you know, cook your food outside, or you just buy food that doesn't need to be cooked and you just eat it in your room. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no need to have a society like we have today in America. It could be way better in a no-go zone or anarcho-capitalism, with no effort whatsoever. Just take away the regulations, and people automatically find super simple, easy, super cheap solutions, right? Like maybe standard of living would be, in a sense, lower, but what's lower? Like being super stressed about rent and being, you know, in danger of being out on the street, or actually being out on the street, or living in a tiny little box and having to, you know, eat uncooked meals, like, you know, meals that don't require cooking or whatever. It doesn't mean you need to eat, like, you know, rice or wheat raw or something. You just buy, like, you know, a block of cheese and you buy some, you know, tempeh and all the stuff that's like, you know, canned fruit and all that stuff. Stuff that doesn't require any cooking. It's easy, you know, like you don't need electricity. You don't need all that stuff. You know, you can just have that in communal places where people go and use the electricity. You know, so there's no need to have it the way it is in America, where everything's super expensive, right? Like, but back to what I was saying, like, XXers can't do anything functional. They can't be rational. They can't work hard. They can't be moral. They can't be honest. They can't be wise. They can't realize what's going to happen down the line from their actions. And so the female half of the society, the half of society filled with only XXers and liberal men, that society outside the commune would collapse. And then the no-go zone would be able to take over the whole country, or take over at least way more land, and then give the liberals like 20% of land, 10 or 20%, say, hey, you liberals, you really want to stay liberal? Okay, here's 10 or 20% of the U.S. land. Do your thing. Have your liberal utopia. We'll see how well it works out for you. And then the no-go zone takes over the whole, you know, the rest of the country, the 80-90% of the land of the country, and then everybody's either conservative or has converted to conservatism, you know? And then there's no more voting. There's just, you know, libertarianism or anarcho-capitalism or something. And then you have way more freedom, you know, hardly any regulations. The standard of living is way lower. There's little or no taxation, etc. And everybody is happy. Even stupid, poor guys are infinitely happier than they are today. You know what I mean? So that could easily happen. You know, all you got to do is form a giant no-go zone, and it would automatically take over the country just by keeping women out, right? And just think of how much more efficient and prosperous and frugal men will be when they're not wasting money on XXers, when they're not, you know, fighting with each other over XXers because there are no XXers in the no-go zone, etc., etc. Imagine how much better men will be getting along. We'll be forcing it to be a meritocracy. We'll thereby be making very quick progress in all ways, in advancing technology and gardening, in making a functional society and keeping costs down, etc., etc. Maybe even making more advanced weapons, whatever. Like all ways, all things will advance super quickly in a society of only men. And so, and like I said, the community outside will, because of its liberalism, would utterly collapse. And then the no-go zone gets to take over the rest of the country, right? But like I was saying, this automatically also incentivizes the women to give up all their rights. And then they want to do that, and then they'll do it, and then, then they'll stay that way. They'll stay submissive. They'll stay, under men's thumb, and then they won't be a problem anymore because her husband will be keeping her in line. He'll spank her and he'll force her to learn obedience and submissiveness so that she's not a thorn in everybody's side. And all the men of the commune will force him to do so. They won't let men let their wives run rampant or, run roughshod over them. And there will be no marital rape laws. And it'll be the case that, women will not, XXers will not be allowed to join the commune unless, they agree to marry. So you don't have a bunch of single slutty XXers, going around causing all kinds of problems. Incentivizing premarital sex and getting men to fight over XXers for that premarital sex. You just don't let XXers into the no-go zone unless they're willing to marry. And marry right away, or marry before they're allowed in. Marry a guy in the commune, and then they can come in and join. Like that's how you have to do it. That's how you do it, and then it would work great. And the last thing I want to mention is a Bowflex commercial that I saw that showed, number one, more girls than guys. It was almost all girls. Number two, I think almost all white girls there were, if I remember correctly. There were like 3 white girls and 1 black girl in the commercial. And number 3, the only 2 guys that the commercial showed were a black guy and a guy who's either half black, half Latino, or he was black. Right? So this commercial showed mainly girls, but mainly it showed white girls and then black men. So there wasn't a single white guy in this commercial. I'm telling you, all major multinational corporations are in the Illuminati. They all push the stuff the elites decide at Bilderberg that they're going to push. They all push multiculturalism, miscegenation, the female empowerment movement, and other pernicious things. The elites are really trying to disenfranchise white guys. They are really trying to make it so that, white XXers don't want to breed with white men. Because if they can accomplish that, then they can make, whites go extinct, or at least greatly diminish in numbers and in power. And then, whites won't have control of their own countries anymore, and will thus be completely disempowered, because as long as people who are white don't have control of any of their own countries, it'll be the case that unless whites form anarcho-capitalism, whites will have no global power and no power over their own lives, and as such, they will be tyrannically ruled by statist countries that don't even do their own will, but do the will of the minorities instead, or at least governments which only do their own will and will often be to the detriment of their white population, even if that white population is the biggest minority or even a slight majority in that country. Right? The elites mainly just show fat or geeky or moronically stupid white guys on TV and in commercials now. Like that Pepsi, or was it a Coke commercial, with the nerdy white guy with the beard, and he's on the bus or subway or something, and he's dancing to that Shakira song, Whenever, Wherever. Have you seen that commercial? Like, that's just a perfect example of it, Like, the elites are now loath to show attractive, fit white guys on TV because doing so would make XXers attracted to those guys and would make white guys seem cool. But if the elites no longer show good-looking white guys, then it makes it seem like white guys are uncool and XXers are very much affected by what seems cool. Women are very much into trends, and they're very susceptible to propaganda, right? And even when they do show very, very good-looking white guys on TV, like that guy who played Sebastian on Legacies, I think he's a British guy. I think his name is, I can't remember his name. But anyway, that guy is incredibly good-looking. God damn, dude, he is like probably the best-looking guy I've ever seen in my life. Even when they do show attractive white guys on TV, they're guys like him who are like either the villain or sort of a villain. Right? Like an undesirable mate, right? Like Sebastian proved to be this sort of, I don't want to say mentally ill, but like sort of unstable guy who like sort of forces things on women, and he's just like, he's just not really a good guy. He kind of is, but he kind of isn't. Like even when they show really good looking white guys, they're not the hero. Like they're either the villain or a pseudo villain. right? Like the elites now show black and Middle Eastern and Latino guys as hot and fit and cool, and they show white guys as weak liberal pussies, which, you know, to be fair, in a sense is true, but in a sense is not true, because it's only true of maybe, you know, 50% of white men. It is propaganda, because the main reason white men are that way these days is because of these evil multinational corporations using tons of pesticides on the food and using BPA on the receipts and other things, and thus decreasing testosterone levels. And because of all the propaganda the elites have done and all the destruction of the family that has been done by the elites, all the misandric laws and the impoverishing taxation, which makes it so that white fathers have a much harder time raising their sons to be masculine and can't properly discipline their kids. And of course, showing white men as pussies is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it normalizes being a pussy, and therefore it makes more white men into pussies. You know, this miscegenation and multiculturalism propaganda is a form of treason. And these CEOs of these companies that push it should all be given the punishment for treason. And I think you all know what that punishment is. It's forcible exsanguination. This has been Redshift, so hopefully someone got something out of this video. Peace.